our show wouldn't exist without you listening. But if you want more information on how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or just to stay in touch, go to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there. Welcome back, everybody. You know what we do here by now, and I just love when we get introduced to incredible people. You know, there are friends that I've had on this show. There are people that I have a deep relationship and have lots of knowledge, and there's people that I might have a one page of just a little bit of information. And I actually love the authenticity of extracting the truth in people in just a real, raw interaction and conversation. And today we were introduced by another guest that's been on the show, Kate Eckman, to an individual who really is doing things different. He understands the value of going inside. And I just love that he has a book that's titled Shattered by Suicide, Renewed by Resilience. The way that this man moves through the world to elevate kids and parents to understand how to get better coaching, how to understand how to grow throughout their sports, how to really identify and connect with who they are. But ultimately, a lot of the ways that he's teaching is how to move through this world, because guess what? Life is going to hit and you just got to keep standing back up, but you have to extract the lessons. And this is a man who's dug deep, and I cannot wait to feature the lessons of his life with you all today. So Jason, my friend, so happy to have you here.
Ryan, again, thank you for the chance to be on the show. And I'm looking forward to the conversation, man. Like we talked about before, anytime you can have authentic, genuine, real conversations, I think that leads to transformation. So I'm excited to be on here today with you.
Yeah, I genuinely believe, my purpose in life is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs, right? And I believe that when we actually share our truth and we communicate things, it really does shorten the curve for others. There's transference, right? There is transformation. We can tap into the collective wisdom of other people's stories to shorten our own curve to learning. You clearly understand that deeply as a coach, right? You've been coaching in multiple capacities for a long time. I introduced you a little bit based on how I see you from the limited information and the introduction that we had. But brother man, can you tell us who you are in your words?
I'm just somebody that is trying to be the best person I can be and trying to get better every day. And what I mean by that, to go deeper than that, is I mess up every day. I have failures. I have things that hold me back. I have fears and scares. But the thing is, I try to conquer those things by getting out of my comfort zone, by being a great husband, being a great dad, and focusing on the titles that will be my titles for the most of my lifetime. Like, I'll always be a dad. I'm hoping to always be a husband. I'm hoping to always be a son, an uncle, those kind of things, and really put in perspective of like what really matters at the end of the day. Because the truth is, any job you have, no matter how service oriented it is, when you leave or when you're done, somebody else is going to be right in your spot.
Yep.
And the truth is, over some time, people will remember you, but there's going to be new things that come in and out, right? So I think through the things that I've experienced in life, I've realized, like, keep the most important as best as you can.
Yeah. I appreciated how you integrated all the different roles and places that you have to show up in this world, right? And it means that Jason has to show up as Jason in multiple different hats and multiple different environments, right? And you're clearly a protector and connector, but you put special emphasis on being a good father and a good husband. And I also appreciate the depth of focusing on what's important. So can you help define what being a good father and good husband means to you? And help me understand, over this journey of refining that path as a husband and a father, what have you ultimately determined is most important for you today?
Yeah, I think, from a husband standpoint, my dad was a great example of what a husband looked like. He was provided for me and my siblings. He loved my mom. He cared about her. He, went out of his way for it. And I think, what it means to be a great husband is to learn who your wife is, be a great listener. And I'm still working on this, but loving her how she wants to be loved, not necessarily like what you feel like your perception of what love is.
Yeah.
Right. And that can be two different things. And that's not always easy because we are inclined to think like how we think. Right. But being able to shift your perspective and listen and see, like, okay, what do you love to do? Or what is it that I do that makes you feel like you're cared and loved about?
Uh-huh.
And then putting that into practice. And again, like, this is something that I've learned, is that it's never completed, right? It's always a process, because the longer you're married, the more you change and evolve. Like, I'm not the same person I was when I was 27. And that's a good thing. Like, we're meant to grow and evolve. but so that means also so is our spouse, right? Yep. And so is our kids. Like, you know, my kids are 6 and 4. They're going to be way different at 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's always like checking in, asking how your interests are changing, being, like you said before, being interested. And so that way you become more interesting.
Yeah. I really appreciate how you talk about that as a husband and a father in particular. You know, my wife and I have been together for 17 years, but we talk about how we hid from each other for 14, right? And it was really about the expectation of what we wanted from each other instead of how we were caring for each other. And your really clear nuance on the consistent desire to be more interested and grow in that space as a husband and father. As a dad of an 8 and 9-year-old, I can tell you as well, you're exactly right. 6 and 4 is different than 8, 9, and 10. Like, it's a whole different game, and we have to continue to refine this. So I want to bring back the tail end of that question, because this is something I want to really extract from you right now. You answered the part about the husband and father, but help us understand through this process how you've determined what's most important to you right now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, sometimes life gives you reminders, right? And when I was 17, I lost my dad to suicide.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, at where I'm at, I had a coworker. She just lost her son to suicide, and his funeral is actually on the 20th anniversary of when my dad passed away on May 8th, coming up next week. You know, so it's a lot of triggering moments, right? And
huge.
So for me, it's a reminder of that. Yes, it's tough, but it's also how quickly life can change.
Yeah.
And how much, like, you know, make grand hellos and extravagant goodbyes just to make sure that you know, like, hey, this is the last time I see you, which I hope to God it's not. At least I gave you a great hug, and I can say, like, I have some closure with how my last interaction was with you. Again, you can't do that with everybody. I'm talking about the relationships that matter the most. Like, again, wife, your kids, you know, your parents, like that kind of thing. You know, because again, from my experience, like I've learned that life can just flip on a dime so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and even from like morning to daytime,
it can,
even within the same day. You know, so
sometimes in the same moment. I mean, truly, you can exist on both sides of the same coin in the singular moment. It can flip so fast. You know, the perspective of losing your dad at 17 is real, and we're obviously going to dig into some of the components of how you moved through that and those experiences. But I want to start before that, man. Like, tell us about your dad in the first 17 years of your life. Tell us about the relationship, what, you know, intellectual and emotional narratives you extracted from him, his words and actions. Like, give us a little feel for who he was and the relationship you had with him.
Yeah, I mean, he was a fun person, right? He was always had a great personality, you know, great sense of humor, loved to play sports, loved to, you know, but he also knew the value of doing things the right way, right? And the value of, like, you know what, if you're going to do something, give it your best. You know, he was an electrician, right? So he's a blue collar guy, right? And he gave everything you got to show, like, what does it mean to be a provider? And I think the one thing he also taught me by dying by suicide was that you got to ask for help, and it's okay to not be okay. You know, so as much as he taught me about some of the things to do right, he also taught me, like, man, I should probably be more vulnerable with my wife when things aren't okay. I should probably let my kids in a little bit more whenever I'm feeling down, or if I'm feeling like I'm going through a hard time, like, let them in.
Yep.
Because then that makes you more human. Like, I saw my dad as just like, okay, he's got it all figured out. He's smart. He's got everything taken care of, you know, and then he really didn't.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's also a relief in that whenever you let your close loved ones in on things. Like, there's this, okay, I don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Okay, they still love me for who I am, even though, like, I'm feeling like uptight, or I'm feeling like I'm like things are caving in, or whatever, you know, you name it, the things that come up, right? You know, so I think that's the key is, like we talked about before, the more vulnerable you can be, the more, like, just upfront and honest about what's really going on. And now, honestly, with my 6 and 4-year-old, I have to tailor that a little bit. You can't go, like, all
age
the way.
Appropriate, obviously.
Yeah. But even say, like, you know what, Dad messed up today. You know, I didn't have my best day today, but I can always learn from it.
Yep.
I think that helps them realize, like, they don't have to be, like, you know, all together, all perfect all the time either. And the stress the pressure that puts on kids as well.
I completely agree. And I think that the more that we can empower them by us setting the example, because the reality was we're all human. We're all going to create damage in moments that we react and don't have control of what's happening real time in front of us, right? Like that doesn't mean we create damage at exponential measures, but it could be something as simple as armor or protection that causes an edge that disconnects the person real time, right? It could be you give your kid a look and it's got a little more tone to it, or you raise your voice just a little bit, right? Like we're all human and it's all going to happen. And what we've tried to teach our kids is that like damage is guaranteed. You can prevent most of it if you're intentional, but when there's damage, repair is essential.
Yeah, clean it up, right?
And like take awareness and ownership and moving through those things, and exactly right, taking responsibility for where we're at. You said that your father gave you a great example of and a definition of what it meant to be a provider, but then also you have the ability to not be okay, not being okay, or sorry, being okay, not being okay, right? Those in some ways seem almost counterintuitive and conflicting, but I see them as really complementary. I'll tell you that for me, and you don't know my story and my backdrop, there's a lot that's in it, but I got extremely armored and protected because of a lot of things that I didn't see, wasn't standing in. And so what happened, right? To be a provider, I had to be strong, right? I had to not show emotion. I had to bury a bunch of stuff. Like I had to have mental toughness, right? Which correlated to high amounts of external success. And I was a provider for my family financially, with physical safety, with leadership, with love. But my family I didn't provide them with emotional safety until the last 18 to 24 months because of what I was guarding and protecting with my inability to be as vulnerable as I could be. I'm curious, how do you walk that line for yourself, right? As a man, as a provider, as a protector, while still giving yourself and everyone around you the permission to feel what's real?
Yeah. I think this is, and I always get things that come to me naturally. And one of the things that has came to me over the time is that be confident in what you know, but also be confident that you can always know more.
Yeah.
So I think confidence is part of it. And what I mean by confidence is like just believing that you're going to get better and believing that if I gave my best effort, like that's enough.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And it doesn't have to, other people's standards, they might be disappointed or it might not be enough for them. But if you know, like, hey, look, this is the best I got today. Tomorrow, I plan on getting a little bit better. And in a year's time, I'll be about 10 times better than what I'm at right now.
Yep.
This is what I got right now. And I think that is the key of accepting where you're at and acknowledging where you're at, but acknowledging that the future will be better.
Yeah.
And sometimes even slowing down too, right? I mean, I feel like sometimes we get caught up that we got to be go, 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 go. What's the next goal I got to achieve? Mm-hmm. What's the next thing I got to do? What's the next? And when you look back at it, like, man, what are we going to remember the most? Probably the time whenever we ate ice cream with our kid or the time that we had a pillow fight or,
That's right.
It's these random moments that it caused an emotional excitement or an emotional thing that like connected you together.
Yep.
That's what you get. Like, and money and wealth are all good things. Like you can do a lot of good things, but when you're done with your life, like nobody's going to care about how much money you made. They're going to care about what you did with it to make the world a better place.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right.
At the end of the day, like it all gets passed down to somebody else anyways. It's not like you actually keep it, right? It just gets dispersed. So, I think that just shifting some of the perspective on like, what does it really mean to be rich? Yeah. What does that mean? Right? Because it's not the fancy car, the big house, which all that stuff is awesome, cool, right? But to me, a rich life is like going home and hugging my kids every night or taking them to baseball practice or watching a show with them that they like, whether it's Go Dog Go or Blippi or whatever it is right now for me. And it's like just being present with them. That to me is a rich life. Yeah.
It's interesting. I flip-flop the rich and the wealthy for you. I say rich is an indication of a lot of money. Wealthy is an indication of connection and depth in life. And so what's really beautiful is we're saying the same thing. It's just the nuance in the lens that we view it through. But I would be really curious. You gave us a couple of the core lessons that you got from your dad. I would be curious the connection and the relationship that you felt with him. And did you see the path coming that ultimately led to the decision and actions that he made?
Yeah. I felt like I had a good relationship with my dad. I was the only son too, right? So I felt that, there was a standard that, what, you got to work hard. You got to become a man. You got to like do the certain things that traditional manhood, right, said. And because of that, like I had a job in high school, right? I was doing a lot of things, quote unquote, the right way. And so I was really oblivious to the things that he was struggling with, to be honest. I mean, and you remember being 17, like you got your own world, you got your buddies, you got your friends, you're driving, you're doing your thing, right? And the last thing I remember is studying for an algebra 2 test and him sleeping on the couch. And that's my last thing I remember of him. And not to say that education is not important, which I'm glad, preparation like that kind of stuff. But if somebody would have told me that, hey, maybe just say, hey, I love you, Dad. Would that have been the one thing that would have been like, I don't know, and you can say woulda, shoulda, coulda all you wanted to. But again, I think you can take any burden and turn it into a blessing. Not saying that my dad died by suicide is a blessing, but what are the things that I could take from it? And that is like fine tune those moments and like look your kids in the eye, give them a hug and tell them you love them. Look at your wife in the eye, like just be more connected with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate that. Hey, Wyatt, did you see I don't know what just happened. Hold on one second, Jason. We're going to have to crop this because my camera went out. I don't know what just happened.
Yeah, it's that way on this side too.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. We're back.
There
Do you have any idea what happened, dude? All right. If it happens again, I'll just pick back up. Let's just keep it recording. Okay. Hold on. Let me get inside real fast. So we just had a little bit of a glitch with the camera. So if that cut out, that's what that was. But Jason, the refining in these moments is such a really critical piece, right? And you talk about the relationship that you had with your dad and where you're going. And, you said it best. You lost your father at 17. You were blind to what it was. You could have gone down the woulda, coulda, shoulda in so many ways. But again, it's about the power and the lessons that we can extract. When you were 34, you had a reflective talk with him where he talks about being overwhelmed in just a 3-day time frame, leading to his actions, right? You also talk about love. I know that lots of kids and lots of sons who have been in situations similar to yours have had lots of emotions around abandonment and shame and fear and resentment and frustration and anger that have all bubbled up as a result of their feelings as a result of the actions of their parent. I'd really be curious, what were you experiencing at the time, having had no idea to within a matter of a day or two, your father was gone? Mm-hmm. Where did you begin? What were those thoughts and feelings, and how did you start to navigate that path?
It's still a journey. I'll say this, like, it's never like, oh, I got this.
That's right.
It's 20 years later, right? So, but let me take you back. So, there's the initial shock of it. There's the denial piece of it. Then there's the reality of it. And then from there, you have things that come up in life that remind you that sometimes hit you out of nowhere too. And you're like, whoa, like what just happened? Right? Like you feel a certain way, like you're thrown back, like it just happened like yesterday, even though it's been 17 years, you name it. Like, and for me also too, as a 17, 18-year-old in 2003, counseling wasn't cool. Like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
You and I are the same age, by the way, and I completely identify with that. Yeah.
It was not like, if somebody knew you were going to counseling, that might have led a whole onslaught from you. Like, you need seeing a shrink. Like, what are you, like, what's wrong with you, man? Like, yeah. That would, so I was like, I told my mom, she recommended it. I was like, nope, I got this. I can handle it. I got this. But what I didn't realize I was doing, that it was all those pent up trauma, all the things I was holding and suppressing were eventually going to be expressed. And and I talk about this in my book. It was like, it came through dreams. So I in my 20s, powerful. I would go to sleep and I would feel like this intense anger. Yeah. And it felt like and sometimes it felt like my dad was still alive, but he was think of any bad dad situation. The dad that, the substance abuse dad, the yo-yo dad that comes back and forth when he needs something. Like, it just kept replaying and I didn't understand what is happening. Why? And I would wake up and I would have to slap myself to say hey, that was a dream, because it felt so real. It felt like he was alive again. It was just really trippy, So there was that piece of it as well. And I was like, okay, I started diving into personal development. I started understanding how your mind works, how your emotions are connected to your mind. And that's where I went on this path of okay, I got to figure this out, because if I'm going to get married, if I'm going to have kids, I don't want this to be passed down to them. Like the trauma stops with me. It has to. And so I've literally done a deep dive into like learning what does forgiveness mean? What is be able to move past that? What is, and they sound like, very churchy terms, but they're not. Like they are exercises that no matter what your faith background is, or even if you believe that there's a higher intelligence, they work.
Mm-hmm.
And
they
can
absolutely
set you
do.
free from a lot of the internal like chains and things like that hold us back.
Yeah, we teach people to go inside and identify the trash from their past that keeps them stuck and continues showing up as their biggest problems in life, relationships, business, and health. And you talk about it as triggers, right? We've helped people go through and identify and trash their triggers, because those are those moments that, your wife could say something to you about how she thought you loaded the dishwasher incorrectly, and you're reacting nothing to do with your wife or what she said, but everything to do with how your dad looked at you when you were 4, right? Like, and the cellular memory and reaction feels the same, even though the present state is so different. And it's about separating in that moment. So even the way you're talking about that, and I wanted to go back because before we got interrupted with the tech glitch with my camera, you were talking about your father and how you didn't know. And what's really interesting is you're right. Therapy was taboo for people our age at that time. But look at the generation of fathers that we also had. Those of us that are mid 30s to mid 40s, right? Grew up in a generation of men that were literally told even more than we were not to feel, right? To not express what they were doing. And we always say that the trash from our past or your past is not your fault. It just becomes your responsibility once you become aware of it. But we generationally inherit it, right? It's passed down through our parents and through all these different things.
Right? Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're talking about. And so that's something I would be really curious about. You had about if I'm following the timeline correctly, you had about a 10-year gap between the time of losing your dad and between the time you got married. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Did I hear you say you got married at 20? Okay. So, so in those 10 years, like, what were some of the greatest ahas that you had? Because if you realize that the trauma has to stop with me, what were the thoughts, feelings, and actions that you had to take to actually heal, diffuse, and reverse some of those anger bouts? Because, dude, working through that can be challenging for a lot of people.
I mean, to be honest, like if I wanted my wife to marry me and be the person that she was going to be able, like, I was like, it sounds simple, but I was like, if I want her in my life, then I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, or it sounds like, oh, that was it. That's all it took. And I was like, because they've done studies too that the number one key to longevity is relationships and the quality of those relationships. And so I saw her as a person, like sometimes you just know, right? Like when I met her, I was like, she's different. And I got
That's how I was with my wife. Yeah.
Like, and I was like, man, I think I really like would want to be around her like more. And then it started, I was like, I think I want to marry her. And I was like, I got a lot of things to clean out of the closet before I even like step down that path, because that's a commitment that I feel like I want to make for a lifelong thing, right? So, that's what started. And I'll be honest, man, I was the biggest overthinker, worrier, you name it. It's all because of the trauma that I had. Like, the not enoughness, the shame, the abandonment piece of it. Like, am I doing things right? Am I messing up big time? And that was all in my head.
And never being able to get validation or connection with your father again, right? Which every boy wants.
So I was if there was a trophy for overthinking, man, I would have won gold medal.
I might have competed with you there, bro. You and I might have been on the same path there. That's but yeah, you lived in your head, right? And you it perseverated. It was protection. It was armor. It was all of it. As a dad, I've really, really enjoyed how powerful our kids are in the reflection of who we are. Right. I'm learning that the more I see moments that I react to them, I'm actually reacting to myself, and I can use them as my most effective coaches if I'm aware and intentional to be able to move through that. I also didn't realize until I became a dad how many patterns from my father I inherited that I didn't even know existed. Right. And so you go in with this idea of the trauma's ending, but you're also human. And you and I both know there is no final destination. You've said it multiple times.
Yeah.
So what are some of the patterns of your past with the relationship with your dad that have carried forward to your relationship with your kids that have either been complementary or that you have realized you want to break the generational pattern?
Yeah, I think complementary pieces would be like, if you're going to do something, give it your best effort. Like, don't do something halfway.
Yep.
Right? Or, have a plan, be prepared. But if it doesn't, I think one thing is like, if it doesn't work out, then what is the hidden lesson behind it that we can learn from it? Like, get more curious about it. Like, get like you. And to be fair, like my dad, my grandpa was in the military, right? So military household, you know, a lot of the things that were regimented, you know, and that kind of thing. So I think one of the things was I tried to be more, and granted, like, I feel like parenting is an evolvement, right? My parents were probably better than what their parents were.
Yep.
And so I feel like it's a duty for me to be better than what my parents were. And we have so many more resources now to look
so
into.
Many.
You know, I mean, there's a conscious parenting coach on every social media handle, wherever, telling you some great stuff, right? But I've taught my sons, like, how to breathe, like how to take a deep breath, right? How to walk away as opposed to, you know, let an argument trigger into like an explosion.
Yeah.
When you feel frustrated, like, you know, what do? Like, all those, like, don't run from these emotions, but like feel them.
Yes.
And then face them. That way they don't expand, right? Because as much as we want to say, like, oh, hide your feelings, like suppress them, don't use them, we all have them. We're given them.
Yeah.
And the quote unquote manly thing to, like, oh, don't express emotion, like, that is a bunch of BS.
It's toxic masculinity, and it is BS, and it's just creating more damage than good. You and I both know that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the truth of it.
Like, you're either hiding behind your ego, or you're hiding behind your accomplishments, or you're hiding behind, you just layer it. And then if you pull back the onion, you know, we're all made the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe if we don't feel, we don't heal. And it's something that I've had to continually learn. Now, I didn't share my story with you, but when I was a little kid, my left arm was torn from my body. It was reattached. I've had 24 surgeries. The only reason I say that in the context of this is when I shut off physical pain, I shut off emotional pain, mental pain, and spiritual pain for 20 to 25 years and didn't realize it, right? Like, there was a lot of stuff that I buried as a result of this situation. But, you know, hearing you talk about all of this stuff and the progress and we need to feel it, we need to bring these things to the surface. I also know that in my process of evolution, there have been things I wasn't conscious that I wasn't feeling. And there are things that I am conscious that I'm feeling that I don't want to feel and could have a tendency to avoid it if I'm not careful, right? I'm really curious for you, what are those areas that you're still exploring your feeling in depth? And where are the areas that you're still struggling to kind of move through the triggers of your past?
You know, as the oldest kid, I think this is kind of the oldest kid anyways, but like, overcoming the whole people pleasing thing, right? Like,
yeah.
I think that was, and I did that to kind of keep peace after my dad passed away. Sometimes it was easier just to be like, you know what? Okay, cool. Like, is everybody like satisfied with this? All right. And I think though, where I can show up wrong is like, maybe I say yes to too many things, or I commit to too much stuff, or I stretch myself too thin, right? I'm like, man, why did I do that? You know, so I think letting my no be my no, my yes be my yes, I think is something that I am consistently working on. And asking myself, does this really resonate? Does this put me on a path with what I really feel like my calling? It's not my career. What am I here for? You know, and I remember, like, initially starting out, if I was like, any opportunity, I'd be like, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah. Now, as I get older, I'm like, I evaluate things.
Yeah.
Right. I've learned as a recovering people pleaser that not every opportunity is as, you know, amazing as it comes to, like, dig a little deeper. Say things like, oh, let me think about that. I'll get back to you in a couple of days. Like, really give yourself time to process things and really only say yes to things that really truly are going to make you happy and make you feel like you're living on purpose. Yeah.
So why are you here, my friend? What is your purpose?
You know, they always say, like, you know, if you combine your greatest pain point plus your greatest passion and you merge those, that becomes it. So for me, like, my mission in life is to make suicide, anxiety, depression an irrelevant topic in our society. And right now it's through the avenue of sports. Will it always be the avenue of sports? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I know, like, as I've coached and as I've, you know, built 40 athletes out, and as we're working on a thing right now called Most Valuable Parenting.
Beautiful.
To give parents who have kids in sports a better understanding of, like, why are you here in the first place?
Yeah.
Why are they playing? And how is this helping your relationship get better?
Yeah.
How is this improving your life? Because a lot of times you get caught in the rat race of youth sports and you're going 1,000 different directions. At the end of the day, you're like, why are we doing this? You know? So So I think that's why I'm here. Like, I'm here to be an example of, like, if I can do it, so can you. Because I'm a small town kid, man. Like, I didn't come from, like, Beverly Hills or New York or whatever. Like, small town, mid-Missouri kid, But if I can find a way, then so can anybody else.
Yeah. I love that. I also love that you're very clear that the vehicle right now is through sports, right? That vehicle might change over time. But, let's talk about that because, some people do personal development through the lens of marketing, through sales, through development, right? Some do it through coaching in sports. And, in some ways, I also call these our Trojan horses because it's our ability to like actually show people a path towards the outcome. But what I can tell about you is you're coaching the human even more than you're coaching the form in whatever you're teaching. I can just see that, right? And so your Trojan horse is sports, but then you're really helping them become better humans. So help me understand, like, what does a coach mean to you? And what have been the greatest lessons that you've extracted so far in your process of coaching?
Yeah. Like my mission statement is I coach to empower people to master their mind and win in the game of life through grit, authenticity, and purpose.
I love it.
So it's about developing the person first. And then they'll become better players. And then from there, you have better teams. Because if you focus on the person first and they know that you care about them, then when you have to have a hard conversation with them, if you have to, let's say, make a substitution or you name it, make a change, make a shift, then they may not like it, but they understand it.
Okay.
And the key of anything is understanding. And again, it goes back to relationships. Like, how do you build relationships with the people that you're leading? So when you have to make a decision to pivot, they don't jump ship, but they like, okay, let's ride the course. All right, I got it. So thank you, coach. Thanks for the clarity. And I think it's having honest conversations, having one-on-ones with them. It's getting to know them, who they are beyond just the player, because sports is just what they do. And so many people think like, oh, I'm a basketball player. Oh, I'm a baseball player. Like, no, you're not. You're Brian that plays basketball.
Yep.
Because you'll only be able to play for so long until it's just a rec sport and you're just doing it with your buddies just to have fun. It's not going to support you. 99.9% of the people, it won't. You have to find something else to do. But what are the skill sets within the sport that you play that can help you become better in all areas of life? Right? Yeah. Discipline, being a great teammate, being all in, all these things, patience, right? Resilience, all these kind of, they call them soft skills, but I think they're essential skills.
I agree. Yeah. We always say true strength actually hides behind vulnerability, right? I think it's the soft stuff that really is our strength when we can pay attention to it. And I definitely have found that with different relationships and different ways of coaching, we have to take different mechanisms. But I find in sports, there's a camaraderie and a connection sometimes that exists different than other coaching relationships. And so I'm really curious, how does humor play into, your ability to motivate or connect with your folks, if at all it does? Or in general, what do you think the best kind of way for coaches to connect deeply with the people on their teams would be?
Number one is not take yourself too seriously as a coach. Yes, be prepared. Yes, have them, be ready, that kind of thing, right? But let loose a little bit. Share your family with them. Share your, like I do with my kids. Like, hey man, you know what? This play might work, but there's a chance that it might not.
Right.
And I'm just going off of this is what I think we should do. And I take full responsibility if it doesn't work. And I'll give you all 100% credit if it does, because you all went out there and did it.
Yeah.
So I think it's that, and then it's like asking them, what do you guys see out there? Now, you guys are the ones playing. You guys see anything that I'm not able to see? And allow them to have a voice. It's not my team, it's our team. I'm just here as a guide. And how do you make it fun? Because you can make, for example, I coach 8th grade basketball because it works well with my family schedule. And we started off 1-4 this year, but we ended up winning 8 straight and winning the city championship.
Cool.
And I was like, what do you think the biggest lesson was? Coach, you held us accountable every week. Every week we had to turn in a character card. Was I making the right choices in school? Was I making the right choices at home? If I wasn't, there was a consequence. And And I sat my best player, who probably will be a Division I college basketball player by the time it's all said and done, because he's that good. I sat in the first game because he wasn't doing the right thing. So it's making sure everybody knows that just because your talent doesn't determine what privileges that you do or don't have. Like, everybody set a standard. And if the standard's not met, then there are, hey, like, and that's where the relationship piece comes. Like, hey, man, look, this is what it was. I'm letting you know, you got to be consistent, but you're not starting.
Yeah. What are the differences, do you believe, between being a great coach and being a great parent?
You have to live with your kids all the time.
That's a pain sometimes, isn't it? I love my kids to death, but there are times that my wife and I are like, oh my gosh, like, I never understood the Homer Simpson choking out Bart Simpson thing until I had a 9-year-old boy. And now I'm like, I get it now, even though that's not what I'm doing. I'm just like, there are times when I'm like, oh my gosh, like, stop.
Yeah.
I love
it.
You know,
I think as a coach, I try to coach from a place of like, if these were my kids, what would I want?
Yeah.
You know, because I actually have my own kid in class because he's a kindergartner. I teach kindergarten PE, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm like, so at the beginning, I was like, this is going to be interesting. How is this going to go?
Yeah.
And there's been some interesting moments. I'll say that, because he's fighting for the 50 other kids for dad's attention. So I don't blame him. Like, if he like is trying to get my attention in some silly, goofy, whatever way. Right. But from there, I think I've learned, I'm like, okay, how do I give him and understand, like, okay, hey, bud, dad's coach right now. As much as maybe you and I want to go and shoot hoops over here, I got responsibility to every other kid here. And so, you know, I empathize with him and understand him. But just to go back to your question, I think it's again, it goes back to, like, if you treat every kid with the wanting the best for them mentality, then, you know, you're going to mess up. Sometimes you're not going to do things right, but you're going to clean it up, and they're going to know you at least had their best interest in mind.
That's right. That's right. I love it. I've got a hard shift question for you. You wear socks to bed. I have to know the story behind this.
It's funny. It goes back to my mom, I think, always putting socks on. Whenever I was a kid, I remember, this is kind of weird, but I remember being 3 or 4 years old and my mom saying, like, put your socks on, you know, like, and it's a comfort thing, right? So, like, every once in a while, like, okay, I'm going to go barefoot, right? And like, and it's just,
and every time it's just a sensory thing. You're like, yeah,
it does. And I sleep. And actually, it's funny. They say, like, if you sleep with socks on, it actually increases circulation.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Because when your feet get cold, then all the blood will actually rush to your core because of the extremities, right? So, you know, I don't know. It's just been something that I've done, right? Maybe I should probably wear socks less, potentially, because they say, like, you know, connecting to earth, environment, nature, guys, you know, is good, but it's just something that I've done, you know?
There's no judgment in me, and I'm not going to tell you that you should or shouldn't do anything. I'm always fascinated by that. I had a girlfriend one time way back when who, like, would not ever not wear socks. Like, they had to be on all the time. And like, so there's just all these different stories with socks that I think are funny. And so I loved it, brother. Man, you've really done, like, a lot of cool stuff, and you've really been helping a lot of people. You guys have a program, I believe, that's called the Most Valuable Parenting Program. Could you give us a little bit of insight into that? Because clearly what we're talking about here is how to be a good husband, father, parent, coach, guide, all one and the same. But to be the best human is to exist in all those roles simultaneously at the best of your ability. Talk to us about what you're teaching in this program, what parents could expect, and how it'll help them along their journey in the ways that it's helped you.
You know, we have our masterclass starting on this Friday, and it's 5 videos, and we partnered with a lady who is she's an EQ specialist. She's spoken on some of the biggest platforms, including like Mind Valley and like that kind of thing, on parenting. Her name is Ria Lala. Her website's buildgreatminds.com. And so we're doing a thing called the 5 A's to help your kids succeed. She's going to go through, and this is a free course. And then going beyond that, we're doing a 12-week program where she teaches emotional intelligence, how to connect with your kids, understand what your kid behavior means. It's not misbehavior. It's something deeper than that. You know, go below the surface. And then we come in after she's done that, and we go 6 weeks into, okay, here's how to navigate youth sports where you and your kid have a great experience.
Yeah.
And there's some, also we're doing some audio, like mental fitness meditation stuff with it as
Beautiful.
well. Some online courses that are bonuses, how to run a family meeting. Rita's going to go through that as well. I mean, just some things that, if our parents were taught, had the resources too, it would have been great, but they didn't, right? But we do. And now it's like, when you know better, you do better. And if you have the ability to know better and you don't do it, it's not
then
negligence. It's like,
but it's a choice.
Hey, you're creating every day. Every choice is creating your future. So if you have the ability to make it better, go for it.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Jason, we're going to have all of your links in the show notes. 40 Athletics. We're going to make sure that we get the link for your most valuable parenting program in there. You are showing up in the world in a big way, trying to help parents connect deeper with their kids, but it starts with the kids connecting with themselves and being the best versions of who they are. What's a closing thought or lesson that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
This one and this is just from my own life experience, and what I've learned is that life has seasons, and you got to give life a chance to get better. If you're going through a rough chance right now, like winter always is followed by spring. So at the dark, and even if you think of a typical day, it always gets darkest before the sun pops out. So if you're going through a extremely dark moment, just know sun's going to shine again.
Yep.
I can't tell you when. Like it took me a long time to feel like the sun was starting to shine in my own life again from after losing my dad to suicide. But I had this sense of belief that I felt like things were going to get better at some point.
Yeah. That's such a powerful message, my friend. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, hey, man, I thank Kate for introducing us, and it was great connecting you, and thank you for having me, man. It's been awesome.
Yeah. And for those of you who tuned in on this, Jason flipped open his lid. He took us back to the times when he was really trying to discover who he was as a man, as a husband, as a father, the pain and turmoil that he had to unpack, and his decision to end the trauma with himself. The reality of it is he does have a couple of really core beliefs. Live full out. Be the best human you can possibly be. Recognize that there is no final destination. But the final closing thought also brings it full circle. Without darkness, there is no light. And we all know that everything comes and goes, but it's all about the seasons. Whatever season you're in right now, it can look better. It's just going to require you to flip open your lid and scan your can. What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible, but to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.